Today's hearing is entitled Examining GAO's Findings to Address Data Gaps and Improve Data Collection in the Territories. On May 9th, 2024, the GAO published a report, or the Government Accountability Office published a report on gaps in federal data for the 5 U.S. territories: American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The GAO found that the U.S. federal statistical products often contain data gaps for the territories. The U.S. territories are often excluded from or not fully included in federal statistical data products. Even in instances where the U.S. territories are included in these products, there may be disparities in the timeliness and in the measurement of data quality when compared to the 50 U.S. states and the District of Columbia. Data impacts every facet of our life, from economic development to national security. Statistics provide analytics for planning, implementing, and assessing policy. The U.S. federal statistical system is a decentralized system with over 100 agencies, organizational units, and programs. The federal statistical system is led by the Chief Statistician of the United States within the Office of Management and Budget and the Interagency Council on Statistical Policy. This Chief Statistician also chairs the Interagency Council on Statistical Policy. Data gaps make it challenging to efficiently plan and implement policy. Inaccurate or unavailable data increases the risk of government waste. It also creates barriers for local communities from accessing critical federal programs and opportunities. Quality and robust data, on the other hand, enables policymakers in the government to carry out targeted programs and ensure that laws are carried out in the manner that they were intended. Furthermore, it ensures that the local communities are represented when assessing the distribution of federal resources. This is especially true for the U.S. territories, as they have unique needs due to their geographic location. Many of the territories rely heavily on U.S. federal assistance, including access to federal programs and grants. The U.S. territories are also highly prone to severe weather disasters that often require population and employment statistics to support recovery efforts. As many of the territorial governments do not have the capacity and infrastructure to collect data themselves, they have no choice but to rely upon federal data, even if it may be severely outdated. The data gaps have restricted territory government operations and continue to present unnecessary barriers to economic growth. As the U.S. territories face greater economic challenges compared to the continental United States, it becomes ever more important to have access to quality data. Today, we will hear from agency officials, experts, and from the territories themselves to examine this issue closely and to fully understand what must be done to close this data gap. The U.S. territories deserve and need quality data to ensure that federal and territorial policymakers have accurate information to best implement strategies for the benefit of their local communities. Finding ways to address the data gaps for the territories will not only positively benefit our fellow Americans in the U.S. territories, but also help save U.S. taxpayer dollars. It would have been helpful to have the Chief Statistician of the United States here today to discuss what steps it is taking to ensure the principal statistical agencies taking to improve data collection in the U.S. territories since the publication of the GAO report. In its report, the GAO had specific recommendations for the Chief Statistician to develop better coordinated approaches to address data gaps in the U.S. territories. I am deeply troubled that the Office of Management and Budget lacked the capacity to prepare for this hearing. I am especially troubled when considering the fact that they play a primary role in leading and coordinating the U.S. federal statistical system. This topic is of bipartisan interest to this committee and of great importance to the U.S. territories. It is my sincere hope that their absence from this hearing does not reflect a lack of interest in this critical issue. I would like to thank our witnesses who are with us today to discuss the findings of the GAO report, and I look forward to continuing this conversation about addressing the data gaps in the territories. The U.S. territories vary in population and size, geography, economic conditions, and needs, something that I think every one of you have addressed today. and this often means that policy for the territories should be tailored for each of the territories to ensure that it achieves the intended effect. I'd like to address my questioning to Ms. Braybooks and Ms. Love Grayer. Does addressing the gaps in federal data collection for the territories require a similar approach, or is that unnecessary? Ms. Braybooks?
Thank you for the question. We would encourage, to date, the review of how to include the territories has examined the assumption that we should fit them into the existing products. But I think what has been shared and what we observe is that there are data needs, but we should look at the existing products as well as alternative ideas on how to include the territories. Their size makes them unique, and we see the technical issues of running surveys and sample sizes there. And so one of the areas to provide example is when we look at the economic statistics, we've recently been working to understand, well, how does it work in other island nations? What are they doing in lieu of not being included in surveys? And how can we better extract information from administrative data to move more towards more timely and meaningful information? And so OIA would advocate that while we talk about addressing the gaps, we think about doing it outside of the box to recognize the unique situation and attributes of the U.S. territories.
Ms. Love Grayer, does addressing gaps in the federal data collection for the territories require a similar approach, or is that unnecessary?
I agree with my colleague here from DOI. I do believe that the territories have different needs. They have different data gaps as well and different demographics. So there's not a one-size-fits-all answer. However, we do believe that OMB can play a major role in pulling all of the federal agencies together to understand how to assess the feasibility of conducting data and in conducting more data collection in each of the territories, that there can be a sharing of lessons learned where data has been collected, where some of the challenges that exist to collecting the data have been overcome. So while there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, there does need to be a coordinated approach. And we also do believe that that coordination should include coordinating closely with the territories to understand their highest priorities and understanding in their data needs and their data gaps and what's available even locally to assist with the data collection, and a coordinated approach even with some of the parties that are stakeholders like universities who often have the capacity to do some of the statistics that maybe the officials do not have. So one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work, but a coordinated approach certainly does.
Well, I'm going to stick with you for a moment. And do you have any specific concerns or factors that you can identify as you sit here today that Congress should consider when attempting to address the gaps in federal collection for the territories?
Yes, there are a few I think are important to take into consideration. One is what we just talked about, that there are different needs, that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, that it will take collaboration with all of the levels, and OMB should play a role in that. But another is that there are a myriad of statutes that really authorize these different statistical agencies in collecting the data. And so understanding what those legislation outline, what they do and don't include, and really considering that and any solution is going to be important as well. And also that we do need to engage the territories in this. This cannot be something that the federal government does on its own.
Well, Ms. Guerrero, as a witness from the territories, you both see and feel firsthand the impacts that stem from the gaps in federal data collection for the territories. How has the lack of or outdated data affected the territorial governments and local communities?
Basically, there's funding opportunities that we're unable to apply for because of the data gap. And we've had to improvise to actually
Could you give me a specific example of something like that?
the CJIS Justice Tool, the IRA funding, there's some grant opportunities that we can't apply because we're only eligible for one category, and that is workforce. And in general, and the areas located in the categories, basically in some areas does not represent underserved communities or disadvantaged communities. We have areas that should have been identified, but were not included. So that's a really good example. And with regards to, so let's say the local U.S. Department of Justice grants, there's things there with regards to crime statistics, and basically the data is based on population. So with the 2020 census, we see a reduction in population, so we're going to see a reduction in federal resources coming to to Guam. That's,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, thank you for that information.